good morning, everyone. This is Mark McHargue, President of Nebraska Farm Bureau. I'm on the road coming from my daughter's place and granddaughter in Holland, Michigan. So I'm on the road. My wife is driving. So I'm hoping that I'll maintain signal all the way through. But we are very fortunate to have Congressman Smith with us this morning, taking a little bit of time out to visit with us. And always kind of a privilege when our representatives will spend some time answering some of our questions and helping us get to know what's going on in his day job. And so, Congressman, it looks like doesn't look like you're in DC. So have you been around for the Easter holidays, and kind of what did the holiday look like for you this year?
Yes, we're in Gearing here at the home office, and it's usually we're out of session around Easter, so that's nice. They kept changing the schedule around Easter this year, so it made for a little bit of scheduling drama, but still made it home here. Very grateful. Obviously, it's been a somewhat turbulent year, a calendar year that is. Well, and I guess a pandemic year too. That's I'm not sure turbulent would be the best way to describe it in terms of accuracy, but certainly it has been different, and grateful for many things, especially family and the opportunity last year amidst the pandemic to be with family, both immediate and extended. And so as we are facing many issues as a country, I'm very concerned, and looking at what has taken place this calendar year already legislatively, and now what we are looking at moving forward. I think for anyone who thinks that there's very little difference between Republican and Democratic governance, here we are. And so this so-called infrastructure bill that is barely in the infrastructure, but a lot of Green New Deal. That's what's happening. And Green New Deal is manifesting itself, whether it was in the COVID relief bill in many ways, or now with the infrastructure, where the healthcare and the COVID relief bill, 9% of the bill, and I'm not sure the exact number, but a fraction of the infrastructure bill is actually roads, bridges, airports, and waterways. It is a lot of what I would consider a social agenda, and an electric vehicle, when it's forced or almost forced upon the economy by the government. Certainly, everyone will be forced to pay for the infrastructure for electric vehicles. That turns into a social objective, in my estimation. So there are a lot of discussions to be had on infrastructure. I would expect them to at least try reconciliation. Senator Manchin, I was reading last night, Senator Manchin is kind of a thumbs down, at least at this point, on the infrastructure bill. But obviously that is subject to change. Agriculturally, there are policies coming out of USDA that I think are particularly divisive. USDA previously has kind of avoided things like that. So I hope that this is not a sign of a new chapter at USDA. But we've got our work cut out for us, certainly. And I certainly salute all of you for your participation here this morning, and that we can have this conversation. I value this tremendously. I thank Mark and the entire team at Nebraska Farm Bureau. You're the best, and I just am anxious to continue to work with you, because these issues are too important to just ignore. And I appreciate your solution-oriented focus and your various ideas. So why don't I throw it over to you guys for your questions, comments, ideas, and suggestions.
All right, so just a reminder, if you have a question, you can raise your hand or type something into the chat box and we'll get that question in. I'm going to start out a question here, Congressman, that maybe is just a little different than you might get on a regular basis. So being in politics every day, all day, how do you go home and kind of shut that off? Because one of the things that it's very easy for us to do on this side of the screen is we can get wrapped up in it too. And I know we can get distracted farming, but there's just a lot of anxiety that's going along watching the system, especially those of us that are on the conservative side. Any thoughts on just how we should think about politics? We're going to get into some possible problems and solutions here, but I just wanted to maybe let you talk about that.
Sure. No, I appreciate that. I've been in Nebraska. This is my third week in a row now, working from Nebraska as well. So I have not once turned on the television. Now I'm still getting my news online, actually, and even the Fox News app. I still get the news, but avoiding the TV news, I think I've been able to avoid a little bit of the drama. The beauty of technology right now, of course, it comes with the downside too. But the beauty of technology is that there are all these news channels that I can sort through. But it's important to realize that the news channels are human too. Anything that a human being touches won't be perfect. It'll be somewhat inaccurate from time to time. I try to sort out intent as well. But fortunately, my family keeps me grounded more than anything else, and certainly my faith, where we're able to kind of gather up as a family. And our 3.5-year-old, let me tell you, he can get my mind off of politics pretty quickly as I'm chasing him around the yard.
Right. Very good. Well, Jay or Craig, do we have any questions that have come in yet?
We don't have any in here just yet. So
we do have a hand raised. Don Caldwell. You done mute? There you go.
All right. Good morning.
Morning.
So Congressman Eric did send me a really nice reply, but for the group that's on this morning, rarely have I seen rural farmers and ranchers get so spun up as they are right now over 30 by 30.
Yes.
And the flyers going around and so on. Eric sent me a pretty good response that I've been using, but what are the best words that myself, Mark, staff, whoever can share with these folks? One, to maybe calm them, and two, let them know how to be most effective as they look at it.
Right. Well, it's very concerning because it is a major goal of the president's, one that was certainly offered up in his earliest days with the executive order and with very little details. So the detail part, that's why my colleagues and I have written the president asking for more details. I'm trying to figure out right now how serious the president is about some of these things. I think he has given more than just a mere nod to the far left. We are seeing a full bow. And he is, whether it's 30 by 30, various other executive orders canceling the pipeline. We're seeing energy prices respond accordingly. It should be no surprise, painful as it is. I think, the Democrats, in order to control the House, they need some members from the wide open spaces of the Midwest and certainly the West. And so they're going to have to answer to this politically and I think that they're going to have to explain a lot of this. That's in the short term. I'm raising the issue that we in Nebraska need to be concerned about 30 by 30, because for as far west as our state is, we have notably few federal lands. When Ryan Zinke, my House colleague, was getting ready to go to be Interior Secretary for Trump a few years ago, I stopped him on the sidewalk. I said, now we have notably few federal lands in Nebraska, and I hope you keep it this way. And because we do have, I think, beautiful countryside, it does make me nervous that because we have notably few federal lands, that the federal government with this 30 by 30 would seek to federalize a lot of our land, and we just have to push back. And it's not just protecting the beauty. I think when you look at the attacks on animal agriculture, and the energy and carbon debate taking place, this is about far more than just some acres being controlled by the federal government. It's about a lot more. So that's why we need to be mindful of all of this, vigilant, and believe me, I sense that the public is really catching on to this. And you take the waterways, whether it's the rivers in Nebraska or waterways and ports and just various places, we're talking about livelihoods. And when the federal government seeks to take away livelihoods, that adds to the debate considerably. And so I think the facts are on our side, and ultimately, the entire issue will certainly be on our side, with the general public siding with their nutritional needs and their need to eat, rather than this far left agenda from Washington. Appreciate that.
Other questions?
We do have Don Buell with hand raised. So Don.
Hello, Congressman. Thanks for taking my call. I am also concerned about the green changes, and I have noticed here in Nebraska that I feel like we need to educate more our cities and have more of a unification between city and rural. I operate a corn detasseling company here in Lincoln, Nebraska, and I contract with both Syngenta and Bayer. And Bayer has a written policy to get rid of all local Nebraska crews, and actually all over the United States, within 5 years. I believe we're on about year 2 or 3 of that plan. They got rid of a crew out of Hastings and Seward this year. And I feel like detasseling is the only unique bridge I can think of where teens are learning about rural Nebraska, and that's where we can change the mindset for the future. But Monsanto or Bayer is getting rid of our local crews, which is our livelihood as well. And again, they have this agenda to do it, and I can't compete with an H-2A contractor who isn't paying unemployment and FICA. This year, again, they got rid of 2 crews, reduced our acres by 30%. And I'm just wondering, John Albin, Nebraska Department of Labor, has been told to rubber stamp every H-2A application coming into Nebraska. Is there anything we can do to change this course? Because the law says if there's locals to do the work, they're not supposed to be bringing them up. And I currently have about 1,000 applications for about 400 jobs. I'm going to turn away around 600 local people who could have had a rural experience and are not getting it. And this is also teachers very much needing this income. I have teacher drivers. I'm a teacher myself.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a very interesting information. And I should introduce Katie, who's on the line here today. She handles ag and other issues out of the Washington office. Many of you know Eric here in the district office as well. but Katie, let's inquire about this. That's fascinating, you know, and especially in the context of immigration. Man, there are so many points of immigration that need some attention, and this is interesting that it appears as cut and dried as you're saying, and so this could be very helpful as we do tackle some of these issues. So I'm glad you brought this up, and I'm very happy to look into this.
Yeah, definitely, Don. I will follow up with you offline about this.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Who's next?
Or
We have another question.
yep, Sean Krebs, you should be live.
Hoping so. Morning, Congressman.
Good morning.
I've got a question in terms of your Death Tax Repeal Act, and I think it's HR 1712. Could you kind of give, I guess, everyone else here on the call a little bit of background as far as what's actually in there, or if there's a counterpart from the other side of the aisle that you guys are kind of fighting against?
Well, what we're fighting against is the president's proposal with a stepped-up basis that would really eliminate a lot of the relief that we have fought hard to get already. I can tell you that, you know, the death tax in general is a social justice issue for the left. I didn't realize that until some of my earlier days on the Ways and Means Committee, when we were getting ready to have a committee markup, meaning committee action to move a bill, to perhaps amend a bill and then move it out of committee. Paul Ryan was chairman of Ways and Means at the time. We had a little gathering beforehand as Republicans, and he said, just realize that this could be a rather contentious issue. And I was, you know, at least mentally just kind of dismissive of what he was saying. I'm like, wait, you know, this is a tax issue. It's numbers. Yeah, I wouldn't expect some of my colleagues to be anxious to support it on the left. But I was just kind of wondering how and why it could be so contentious. Oh my goodness. My colleague, then House colleague, Kristi Noem, now governor of South Dakota, she told her personal story, a very compelling story, tragic as it was that her father was killed during, I think, her freshman or sophomore year of college. She left college to join her siblings on the farm, but first, she and her siblings had to take out a loan to pay the death tax. I think that's un-American, quite honestly. But anyway, my point is, after she told her story in a very compelling way, some of our colleagues on the other side absolutely went off, raising their voices that they never expected to get anything from their parents, dollar-wise, and anyway, and now we're looking at even more tax issues because of all of this new spending, and so they aren't even satisfied now with what the exemption levels have been. They used to be at least a little more satisfied with that, but not anymore, and that's why I think the president has issued what he has, and I think moving forward, they're going to do everything they can. I think they just see it as a rich target of money, and it's ultimately what I think they would consider a social justice issue. So, Katie, are there any updates, at least from your perspective? I know Josh in my office typically handles the tax issues, but any more updates on the ag end that you've been hearing, Katie?
I think, Congressman, you've covered it pretty well, but Josh in our office is happy to follow up with any more details on that, what they're working on within the tax subcommittee and within the tax space as well.
Yeah, thanks. But I cannot emphasize enough that this is a social issue for the Democrats, and we have to keep that in mind as we tell our story, that, especially in modern agriculture, you can't just break up a farm and expect it to be financially and economically viable. And I think we, especially as the Democrats become more forceful on this, I actually think we can find some good friends on this issue in the small business realm, and especially in manufacturing. You can't just break up a small manufacturing plant, use parts of it to pay the estate tax, the death tax, and expect to have a viable business. So I think we can find some very friendly voices on this issue. But appreciate the question.
So Adrian, is like in the infrastructure bill that has been introduced, or was there any tax issues in that whole bill? We kind of thought maybe they would throw the stepped up basis and some stuff in there. To your understanding, is there tax?
Well, we're still sorting through a lot of the details. One of their main objectives is to increase the corporate tax rate. Basically, in many ways, undo what we were able to do with President Trump on tax reform. A couple things I want to point out here. Number one, even Barack Obama acknowledged when he was president that we, with our then corporate tax rate that was the highest in the developed world, our corporate tax rate had us so uncompetitive. I saw some numbers the other day. The 10 years before we did tax reform, we had 1,400 US companies leave our country for tax purposes, taking everything with them, all rates. And we have had 0 companies leave our country since we passed tax reform. And so I think it makes no sense whatsoever to raise our corporate tax rate thinking we're going to raise a bunch of money from it, because I don't think we will. I think it will ultimately hurt employees of the very corporations that that they would be seeing an increased rate, going up to 28% from the 22 is I think very significant. 28 is still less than what it was before. However, you have to look at the current state of what other countries are doing. I mean, since we did tax reform, other countries have reduced their taxes as well. But again, it is really more of, I think, a social justice issue from the left, that even if they don't think that it will raise that much money from corporations, it is symbolic of their effort to jam corporations, and they're really wanting to do that. And I think what's tragic about that is, in light of the news of the last few days of these woke corporations making statements inaccurate as they are, whether it's the CEO of Delta Airlines or Coca-Cola, making comments that are ultimately very divisive, and when they're not even based in fact, that's a problem. And so it'll be interesting when these woke corporations are going to be crying uncle for tax purposes, because these plans to tax corporations are very significant. It'll be interesting to see how that all levels out.
Congressman, this is Jordan, and I will say it's always funny when you look at the corporate tax rate of the Nordic countries that some folks like to hold up as the wave of the future, which are significantly lower than what they're trying to push. That's always a fun thing to look at. But I want to follow back up on the stepped up basis conversation. I think the frustrating thing from an ag standpoint is that you have folks that are pushing this, the elimination of stepped up basis, or even worse, the latest proposal that came out from Senator Warren and others on the Senate just recently, to institute, an actual, I mean, the assumption would be that the property, whether or not it actually is, but it would be an automatic cap gains tax at the point of death for someone on inherited property. The frustrating thing, I think, from an ag standpoint is that there is this idea that these folks love small farms. They want to hold on to small farms or small agriculture, and they certainly don't care for larger farms. But when you have and you institute something like this, the amount of property that will be forced to the market that will most likely be gobbled up by larger producers who have the capital to make those purchases. I mean, it just seems to be the opposite of what everything they say that they would like. And so that's a major frustration I hear pretty often from farmers across the state.
Yeah. Well, I think that there will be heightened scrutiny politically. I think, Senator Manchin apparently has said that he's opposed to raising the corporate rate. And again, there's a lot of time and space between now and what ultimate legislation will look like. The fact that Senator Manchin supported the COVID relief bill and some of the silliness in there, that is pretty telling right there. But yeah, it's interesting how I think that Democrats oftentimes very eagerly like to support rural development programs where they'll tax various folks around the country, have folks send their money to Washington, and then some bureaucrats can turn around and give some dollars out for rural development and say they're helping rural America. I think we should leave some of the assets out in rural America to begin with, where they have naturally been developing, and so that's you pointed out very accurately that there's a lot at stake here, and when you look at mere facts, it certainly points to how bad some of these policy proposals are. Well, what else?
Congressman, I've got one here in the chat. It just jumps back to 3030, just looking for some clarification in terms of how much involvement does Congress, would they have in 30 by 30? The question was basically, can the president just ramrod this through, or will Congress have a part to play in the implementation of 30 by 30?
Well, herein lies our questions. Because so few details, actually no details at all, have been offered, other than the 30 by 30 rather than 40 by 40 or 29 by 29. That's the details that they've offered. I would hope that ultimately Congress would have a say, but that's why we can't let up at all in demanding the details. I struggle with even details that might seem friendly. The objective itself is unfriendly to agriculture. And I would say, especially agriculture as we in Nebraska know it right now. A while back, I was taking a tour of a hog facility, and on the same premises was an existing old way of doing hog production, and also the new way of doing hog production. And it was abundantly clear that the new way, the modern way, was very good. Great for the community, great for the animals themselves, great for the economy down the line. And this producer was telling me that it was virtually impossible to get any of the naysayers to even look around, to just be exposed to the new ways of doing things. And so that tells me that there are other objectives than what they say. For example, in a hearing about animal agriculture and perhaps the production or the development of a new facility. They might raise some objections, but I don't think it's really about those objections. It's about other things, and so here we are needing to. Unfortunately, there's such a need to tell the story of what modern agriculture is doing in being good stewards of the environment and also helping feed the world. And so the American people are the beneficiaries of American modern agriculture, and we should celebrate this more than we probably do. I know that so many producers, they're just busy keeping their heads down, working hard to come up with more production for the future, and working hard to maintain economically viable operation. We just cannot take anything for granted.
Congressman, maybe just to follow up on that a bit. So, I mean, this all is going to resonate well with all of Adrian, you represent as well. To a degree, we are kind of preaching to the choir. Farm Bureau, I think, does an excellent job on advocating. I think we can do a much better job, and we are ramping up those efforts. But when it comes to the political side of the spectrum, what else can we do? I mean, we appreciate you getting on the phone with us, maybe sorting through some of the noise that we may hear if we listen to the news, and I really appreciate that. But the next step forward for a group like Farm Bureau, where do we weigh in? How do we bang that bell a little bit louder? How do we amp up our voices? And at what point do we need to change how we message, I guess? I know there's a lot of questions in there, but I think this group is kind of wondering, what do we do next? In a situation like this, just really seems like it's going crazy off the rails. So it certainly has potential.
Right. Well, yeah, I feel like those of us probably on the line here today, we agree a lot on virtually everything, and so it's about reaching others that aren't engaged right now. And I think for everyone on the call today, I'm sure you know some folks in states like Colorado, where there are a couple senators from Colorado who say that they're centrists. Let's give them the opportunity to prove it. That's just one example. It used to be that there were 2 liberal senators from South Dakota and 2 liberal senators from North Dakota. That's changed. But looking at Colorado, that I think is a great state. I mean, here you have the governor who I think regrets having his meatless Monday or whatever he decided to call it and promote. From what I understand, he may regret that, and it's because folks in Colorado spoke out. Producers themselves, ag producers, they spoke out, and I think he heard from ag producers who didn't even necessarily have cattle, and because I think there's growing solidarity among ag producers, and that is, I think that can help us, but we have to be unified in our messaging, and I actually think that the far left is helping us unify right of center, and even right in the middle. Reasonable people are looking at these policies coming out of the administration, seeing that it is crazy talk, and these are more than just talking points. And Nancy Pelosi can say that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and her like-minded colleagues are just 5 votes. But when you look at the impact on the infrastructure proposal that we are seeing as we speak so far, AOC has lots of power, and she has worked hard to, and now she's sending out campaign checks to more centrist-minded Democrats. I was reading an article that's making them a little nervous because they don't want to be associated with the far left, and yet when they support the legislation like HR 1, that's about power. That's about raw power, to then serve as a springboard to implementing far left policies. And looking at HR 1, this is the election bill that basically federalizes elections that I think our founders are rolling over in their grave about. I actually think it goes so far that the courts are likely to step in should the Senate decide to take it up, pass it, and the president sign it. I don't want to sound unconcerned about it, but I do think that it is so extreme that the courts are likely to nix it for several reasons. But make no mistake, HR 1 is about power and control. And that I think that's why there's heightened discussion about what has taken place in Georgia. Even when you look at what took place in Georgia, and it was very thoughtful in its approach and diligent in its maintenance of access to the polls. And I'm trying to think who said this most recently, but why is it that removing deceased individuals from the voter rolls is considered voter suppression? It's a fair question, and I'm anxious for an answer, believe me. What else?
I've got one here. Just a reminder for the folks who have called in on the phone. We have several people who have just dialed in. Just a reminder that if you do have a question, you just need to press *9, and that'll get your hand raised. Then we can get you live, and then you'll need to hit *6 to unmute yourself. So I just wanted to provide that reminder. I guess the other question on the front here that we have is maybe Congressman, do you mind talking a little bit about what you're seeing in terms of the trade policy on that front from the Biden administration? Thoughts there?
Incredibly little. However, let me just say that I think that Catherine Tai, our new USTR, she comes from the Ways and Means Committee. Actually, she was, I think, the trade subcommittee staff director and counsel. I got to know her a little bit during USMCA negotiations when we all traveled to Mexico City as well as Montreal. The lead Republican on Ways and Means Committee, Kevin Brady, he actually helped introduce Catherine Tai to the Senate for her confirmation hearing. I think that sent a great message, and that teed up a strong vote. I'm not sure there were any no votes for confirmation of Catherine Tai over in the Senate. It's kind of rare these days. And so I'm encouraged by who our USTR is. So it is still, we're at a point now where we haven't gotten many details in terms of the administration's trade priorities. I think they may have criticized what President Trump did, but have realized that a lot of progress was made with trade policy and leveling the playing field. And so I'm anxious to hear more. I am continuing to push forward with new trade agreements, celebrating how far we have come in the last few years, but also I can continue to push. And Katie, are there any new developments that you've heard of in the last few days?
Yeah, so like Congressman Smith mentioned, whereas initially the left was pretty critical of President Trump's way of handling trade, it seems like, Tai will be keeping the China tariffs for now. She's also very focused on Boeing Airbus. that tariff dispute with the EU, where things are still fairly quiet with conversations about free trade agreements with the UK and Kenya, and then kind of wrapping up and finalizing Japan and China. But that's not to say that that's not coming down the road. So we're working on that with them right now.
Yeah, so there are a lot of moving items there. At least they were, 6 months ago. It's hard to tell right now exactly where they want to go, but hopefully we'll see more in the coming weeks. But timely question. I appreciate that.
Yeah, Adrian, any help? We had wrote her a letter, kind of giving our top thoughts on trade, and any help that you could provide getting her to Nebraska. Maybe you could help host her here as well. We would love to have her come and meet some of the folks here in Nebraska and build that relationship. So just wanted to put that little plug out there for you.
Yeah, we'll work on that. Certainly appreciate that. And I think, what I think probably the biggest achievement of the Trump administration was the bipartisan nature of trade policy. And that wasn't by accident. And now, granted, there were a few priorities that President Trump had with trade that gave me a little bit of heartburn. But they weren't deal breakers. And I think because both sides realized that, hey, we can come together on 80-90% of these topics and get a lot done. And we were able to do that. So I think certainly an invitation to Ambassador Tai to come to Nebraska is certainly in order, and I'm happy to go to work on it. What else?
We do have, Bruce has a question. Bruce, your mic should be unmuted.
Okay, thank you, Jay, and good morning, Congressman. It's always a pleasure to see you and hear your updates. I have a question following up on the answer that you gave to Mark a couple questions ago. And you mentioned maybe the courts getting involved with some of the Biden initiatives, HR 1, things like that. And I have two questions. One, who are the groups nationally that are trying to put the brakes on the Biden agenda? I mean, it's what I'm looking for is how do we challenge them in courts or otherwise to, put the brakes on, stomp the brakes on the Biden agenda while we regain either control of the House or the Senate or both? And then the second question is, who's all playing in that realm or that arena to try and regain control of the Senate? It's definitely an agenda for us. And I'm going to give Jordan credit on here because he did a phenomenal job leveraging the resources we have from Nebraska Farm Bureau to help Senate candidates and House candidates around the country. But who's playing in that space, and what sort of coalitions do we need to build at both as well as national levels?
Well, that's a fair question, and I'll just talk straight here. You have the desire by a lot of these national organizations to be bipartisan, and you take the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. This is an example where they're trying, I think, to supposedly stay in their lane of business, and they thought they would find a few supposedly pro-business Democrats to support politically. God helped get them elected last fall or reelected, and not a single one, I'm told, of their endorsements voted against the PRO Act. That's the union power grab bill that is a high priority for the Biden administration. And incidentally, the number one concern from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. So I am anxious to engage with them to see, what maybe, what is their strategy if exactly 0 of their endorsements actually supported their agenda, their pro-business agenda. Let's face it, and that's good. Now, I'm concerned that traditionally Republican and pro-business conservative constituencies in the business community have been shifting away. Now, that's just evident in the news of the last 48 hours. So I think that common sense, I'm a little biased, but I think that common sense is on our side. But common sense is not always politically activated, and so we have to do that ourselves. And so I think your counterparts in some ag-oriented states, I think of Michigan as an example, where ag producers can speak to their senators, hopefully, and get them to moderate even a little bit on these issues, because it is that important. Yes, there are some groups out there that are politically activated to try to move things back right of center, but it's difficult. And now I think that the agenda is so crazy these days that it will help us ultimately. I'm just concerned about the collateral damage to our country in the meantime. You look at the close majority in the House and redistricting across America, we are in a very strong position. Some would say we could even get control of the House merely through the redistricting that it is likely to naturally occur. You look at the shifts in population out of liberal states into more conservative states. That's what I speak of on the redistricting part. But I also think that we came so close to getting the majority last fall that it shocked a lot of folks. Number one, it shocked folks that President Trump came so close. It shocked folks that we in the House came so close. Quite honestly, we shouldn't have lost those Georgia Senate races in the special election in January. But I think there's heightened awareness of what Kamala Harris really stands for, and a senator from Louisiana. I would encourage you to look up what the senator of Louisiana said in describing the comparisons of Kamala Harris being in charge of immigration. So I'll let you look that up yourselves. But Senator Kennedy from Louisiana, he's pretty good with his words and entertaining as well. So, but yeah, there are groups out there, but we just cannot let up and cannot let anything, or we cannot take anything for granted. So. What else?
Okay. Well, another question that came in through chat is, what are your thoughts on the attack on the meat industry by alternative protein, and how do we unify our voices to promote beef, pork, poultry as a healthy, sustainable source of protein?
Right. Well, I think nature is on our side, number one. I think consumers, and I was especially interested and even somewhat entertained a while back when it was pointed out how highly processed and high in sodium the fake stuff is, and the point was that its health benefits are not there. I think the ingenuity and so forth, some folks are going to continue to push, innovators maybe will push, but nature is on our side. I think consumers are ultimately on our side, and when we have the opportunity to tell, I think, a very compelling story about how the synergies between animal agriculture and the environment with grazing and so forth, how it's ultimately good for the environment. And, that sets us apart from other countries around the world, when it comes to certainly beef production. And so when you look at, and let's face it, consumers oftentimes take things for granted in terms of the affordability of their food and where it comes from. I was thinking maybe last year, earlier in the pandemic, that there might be a greater appreciation for where food comes from. I'm not so sure. I mean, things were a little turbulent there for a while, but all said, man, we as consumers were in a pretty good spot all of last year, and I'm not sure there's that appreciation for where food comes from that I thought was developing. So we just have to continue, like I said earlier, to tell our story and really stick to the facts that we know are on our side. There will be a lot of distractions, and yes, the attacks on animal agriculture are out there. I'm disappointed that so many of my Republican colleagues team up with the animal rights activists that attack the meat industry, and because it's not based on fact and it's based on emotion, and it's fascinating to watch it. It would be more entertaining if it weren't so sad and aggravating. Definitely. So we can't let up. Hollywood it contributes to this immensely. I mean, my colleagues, good grief, who said that they were just so moved by Bo Derek when she came to Capitol Hill to campaign for animal rights, that they set aside their otherwise pro-agriculture positions because they were compelled by Bo Derek. Give me a break.
Got one more. Yep, we got one more here in the chat. What is the conversation, if any, about servicing the national debt?
Well, I think there is a renewed concerns about that. And obviously, with the pandemic, we had last year a scenario that none of us would have predicted. We have the economic stresses that we were having, generated some legislation bipartisan last year that was considered very temporary. As we do move forward now, we look at some of the things that were considered to be temporary that, yes, were bipartisan. Now there's an effort to extend those into perpetuity, and I'm very concerned about that. Looking at unemployment policy issues similar to that, we've got a huge task before us as it relates to the debt and spending and annual deficits. And so there is, I think, some renewed concern, but we definitely need to keep pushing. I did hear a colleague the other day says we shouldn't be concerned about that because we haven't monetized all the assets of the federal government. Well, good grief, if we got to that point, how bad would it be? And so we need to be mindful, certainly.
Okay, we should have time for about one more question, and John Knapp has his hand raised. So, John.
Congressman Smith, thank you for meeting with us. I have a concern with the immigration issue. It seems like the illegal aliens coming in, they're not tested for COVID. They given passes on airplanes and things that if I want to go someplace, I got to have a test or a pass or passport or what have you. And it seems like these people, they come in and they go wherever they want, and the government's paying for it. And I just feel that's wrong. And then if I understand the different, like COVID plan and roads plan and infrastructure plan has these people getting the different payments that, you know, the American citizens get. And then we have to deal with education. And like in Sarpy County, I believe the average cost of per student per year is about $15,000. And I'm sure there's additional costs associated with the illegals because a lot of them do not speak English. And it doesn't seem like we've got bills that have passed in the past that says these illegal immigrants aren't supposed to get any federal benefits. And I just don't understand what Congress is doing to make sure that our laws are being followed. And I'm concerned what they're doing for the financial impact on the country with all the, you know, the trillions of debt these various bills are going to cost us. Can you give any?
Yeah, well, you know, President Biden may deny that he has created a crisis at the border, but he has. The numbers speak for themselves. The unaccompanied children coming across the border, there's plenty of evidence there. And, you know, the illegal immigration issue didn't go away during the previous administration, but I think a lot of progress was made. And, you know, President Biden, he said, you can come, but just not now. That shows that, you know, he actually acknowledges that there's a problem, even though he still denies it. And certainly his staff tries to explain it away as well. We are a nation of laws where the rule of law is part of our society, and to undermine that comes with, I think, some significant negative consequences. And so I can't believe that we haven't been able to get more done on immigration, even though we have gotten some done. But as was mentioned earlier about perhaps immigration labor directly replacing the labor and some economic opportunities for American citizens, we need to get that sorted out and make sure that we have, you know, that our immigration policy is based in reality and common sense and the rule of law. I've long said that a law-abiding individual wishing to pursue the American dream should be able to do so without having to face bureaucracy and the different policies that end up encouraging illegal immigration. And so, you know, I think that our immigration should be based on freedom, opportunity, and the rule of law. If we disregard any of those, you know, freedom, opportunity, and rule of law, we've got a problem on our hands, as the evidence shows right now. So certainly a timely question, and we've got a lot of work to do on that front. You know, I think, you know, President Trump was willing to tackle some issues relating to this, and Nancy Pelosi wouldn't take yes for an answer on some of these things where there was some common agreement actually in addressing some of these immigration issues. Really appreciate our conversation here this morning. Mark, did you have one more thing?
No, I just wanted to wrap things up. We've used up all of our time, and Adrian, I consider you a friend, and one of these days we'll have to go fishing together and maybe do something besides politics on these calls. But you've represented us well, and I just want to thank you for that. Definitely let us know anything that we can do to help you do your job. We are ready to do that. I think we have a lot of members that are very anxious to do something, take some action in this arena that we're in. So thank you again for visiting with us. Katie, thank you for being here as well. And any final comments?
You bet. Well, thank you. We're all in this together. And please know that I'm incredibly honored to have this opportunity to engage with you and take your ideas to Washington. Obviously, the stakes are high right now, and we need to be mindful that policy matters. Words have meaning. And as we do forge ahead, I'm so grateful for your input and your engagement along the way. So thanks again. Drive safely, ride safely, or whatever the case might be today. I'm grateful to have this conversation. Look forward to next time.